Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 14. Can you believe that we're already here? The end of the class of the semester is in sight, and we are at Thanksgiving week. I know there's lots of craziness going on. We're starting to look at more restrictions again, and my fear is that they'll get worse before they get better in terms of the restrictions. I hope that you're all staying healthy and managing to stay sane through all of this. I know that it makes for a really tough holiday season, but it's important that we all do well and just try to keep from getting sick and getting other people sick. It is Thanksgiving week. Can you believe that? It's gone by so quickly thinking back to when this class started, but they go by fast. And I hate to tell you, for those of you that are on the younger side, but when you get my age, things seem to just keep going faster and faster, even though I know that time stays the same. So we're in week 14. This is the last of your 2-week modules, or let me rephrase that, 2 modules in a week. And so you're going to be learning about funk, disco, and hip hop / rap. So there's a reason that they're all together, because they are connected. It also works out that way in terms of getting to chapter 19, which is always my goal for these classes. So we have been watching from the beginning this sort of movement between, black artists and white artists. We've seen things come together in the 60s in some ways, but music still stays kind of segregated in some interesting ways. I would argue that it probably still does as much today. I think, I don't know, I don't have like the pulse on everything. I think that there are always, and there have been even back in the day, you have white music fans that like black artists, and you have black music fans that like white artists, but you probably still have a majority that sort of likes what they like. And I think that there's a weird kind of self-segregation thing to that. There's probably studies out there, and it would be interesting to see it, but I don't know. Just think about your experience. Think about what you listen to, what your friends listen to, and that kind of stuff. So when we get into, we looked at, in the 60s, we looked at the British invasion. We looked at country rock, at folk rock, at jazz rock, at progressive rock. You learned about punk rock and new wave and all of that. And if you notice that a lot of those things are pretty white. So you may be thinking, hey, what's going on with the black music scene? It was so important to the development of rock and roll through R&B and the blues and all of that. So if you think about, you had jazz, and you had rhythm and blues, and then you had, soul and Motown. And what happens is, you think about a lot of this is dance-oriented music, and that doesn't go away. And so what happens is in the 60s, you have the development of a style known as funk. And this is one of the few times where we have an artist make an appearance in another chapter. So we've seen that with Bob Dylan, and we've seen that with Jimi Hendrix, and now we're going to see it with James Brown. So James Brown was a very important figure with rhythm and blues, and James Brown was really the guy that basically invented funk as he developed into a new style of music in the mid-60s with songs like Papa's Got a Brand New Bag and things like that. And funk is a dance style of music, absolutely. In fact, if you can listen to funk and not want to move, there's got to be something wrong, right? You want to get up and dance and spin and do all that good stuff. And so do it. That's what it's designed for. That's what it's so great about. Great about it is that's what you do. So funk music was really a black-centered music. And what it did was it really kind of stripped down the parts to these individual lines. So if you go listening to a lot of funk music, first of all, it's very bass-heavy, bass instrument, bass guitar. You'll hear the invention of slap bass that comes out of Larry Graham and Sly and the Family Stone. You'll hear these very independent parts of guitar and horns and vocals and drums and all of that. And they come together in this elaborate texture that's very much like a lot of music out of West Africa. And so you're going to get funk. And then what happens out of funk is this style of music that's disco. Disco actually goes back quite a ways in terms, it comes from the term discotheque. and it was a European term. Basically, after the wars, you lost a lot of musicians. People went out dancing, and because a lot of the bands were gone, they would play recordings, and people would dance to the recordings. Well, this became a big thing in the 70s, and the club owners loved it because instead of having to pay a band and that had to take breaks and you had to pay a bunch of musicians, you could pay one DJ to have a couple of turntables, and they would just play disco songs and people would dance. Now, the disco beat was much more simplistic than a funk beat. Funk beats are pretty elaborate. Disco is very more sort of simple. Really, one of the key elements is this what we call a 4-on-the-floor bass. So you get this boom, 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 the bass, the heavy beat, and then you might get a 16th on the hi-hat, like a and that becomes sort of the foundation. The theory, and a lot of people said this, is one of the reasons for the popularity of disco was because white people could dance to it. That funk was too sophisticated, but it became huge. And disco became a huge scene in the 70s, second half of the 70s, bleeding a little bit into the 80s, but really probably hit its peak with Saturday Night Fever in 1979. And it became its own culture, and it became ubiquitous. If you don't know that word, it means it was everywhere. You could find examples of disco in TV commercials and TV theme songs, and it was in TV shows and all of this idea that people would go out dancing, and it became a whole scene. It actually became, in a lot of ways, a pretty hedonistic scene. There were a lot of clubs that had a pretty seedy, lot of like sex and drugs and all that sort of stuff. There's a whole disco subculture that you can look back to. And more modern styles of music like EDM have their roots in that disco scene that came out. So you're going to learn about disco. So you're going to learn about funk and disco, and then disco is going to lead into hip hop and rap. And this gets a little tricky. Hip hop back in the original days was a term really to relate to a culture. It was a culture that came out of New York. Out of the Bronx and then Queens, and then it grew from there. And hip hop culture was really about a whole lifestyle, of which music was one part of it. And the key music of hip hop was rap. You also had tagging, which was the graffiti. You had the style of clothes. These were all components that were part of the hip hop culture. There's a fashion to it and a style to it. And then one of the most important aspects was the dance with break beats and break dancing. And out of that scene, a lot of people, they would compete. Just like we saw with doo-wop back in the 50s. In the 70s, late 70s, you had these dance crews that would compete. And it was a way that different neighborhoods can compete against each other. And you would have people show up with those giant boom boxes, and they'd be playing music. And then DJs started to show up. And then DJs started making mixtapes. And those started getting around. And then the DJs started talking over the music. And one of the guys that was really important early on was a guy from Jamaica named DJ Kool Herc. And DJ Kool Herc, who came from Jamaica, in Jamaica, they had this whole thing known as toasting. And toasting was this rhythmic patter that the DJs would do. That you learned a little bit about that in the ska and reggae chapter. And so what happened is that's where rap comes from. Again, remember, nothing exists in a vacuum. And as I've said before, and I will continue to say, really rap was like the last new thing in popular music. Everything that we've had since 1979 or so has been variations of combining genres and combining things. So you're going to be learning these two chapters. You got funk, disco, hip hop, and rap. Make sure you watch the videos. Make sure that you do the work. I will have the concert reports graded by today. If you're watching this on Monday, my goal is to have it done on Monday. Post those. I have to say that for the most part, everybody did a great job. So there's always, variations, but I was really impressed by that. And that means with 2 modules, you're going to have 2 discussions and 2 reflection observations. Really take the time, put some effort into it. Think about it. I know it's still before your time, but we're getting there. So I want you to be thinking about the questions that are asked and really put some time and some thought into them. The other thing that I'm going to ask of you is just to be focusing on something that you're grateful for or things that you're grateful for. This is the week of Thanksgiving. This has been a really hard season. 2020 has been rough for lots of reasons. But it's important that we're always looking to things that we are grateful for, because I think that that is what keeps us centered and grounded and hopeful and optimistic. So I want you to really be mindful this week about what are you grateful for. I'll tell you one thing I'm grateful for is I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for all of you students that are taking this class. I hope that you're enjoying it and getting something out of it. I hope that by the end you've discovered a new band, a new genre, that we've opened up your musical world a little bit and that you understand a little bit more about how the world works. I'm grateful to have a home. I'm grateful to have a family. I'm grateful for music. I'm grateful for a job. There's lots of things, and I've been in situations where I've been out of work, so I try to keep focused and grounded. So think about that, and then just to encourage us all, reply to this video with something you're grateful for. It's no extra credit this time. This is just something to do that'll help be an encouragement to the class as we see these going in. So that's it for now. I know it's a little longer video than usual, but we got a couple of modules, so that's why I went into more detail. Hang in there. Keep doing good work. Reach out if you need to. I'm here, and the end of the semester is in sight. A couple more weeks, so finish strong. That's it. We'll talk soon. Bye.